Hello, I'm Tina Oelke, your instructor for PSYC 155. Today we're going to get to explore the way we learn. The process of learning is conditioning. Today we'll learn about two types of learning called classical and operant conditioning. Learning is any relatively permanent change in behavior brought about by experience or practice. The brain is physically changed when something is learned. The learning takes part through either classical or operant conditioning. Classical conditioning focuses on reflexive behaviors, or those behaviors not under our voluntary control. We learn to associate two stimuli and anticipate events. For example, when we hear thunder and see lightning, we might wince. With operant conditioning, we associate a response and its consequence. For example, we say please and we get a response. Ivan Pavlov was a Russian physiologist who discovered classical conditioning through his work on digestion in dogs. When he put food in the dog's mouth, the dog began to salivate. Then the dog began to salivate when he saw the dog bowl. Ivan took it further when he put the dog in a room and put the meat powder in the dog's mouth and sounded a tone. Pretty soon the dog would salivate at the tone, and Ivan Pavlov discovered classical conditioning. Classical conditioning is learning to make a reflexive response to a stimulus other than the original natural stimulus that normally produces the reflex. There are several terms that we need to learn in order to understand how classical conditioning works. The first term is unconditioned stimulus, or UCS. This is a naturally occurring stimulus that leads to an involuntary response. The second term is unconditioned response, or UCR. This is an involuntary response to a naturally occurring or unconditioned stimulus. An example of a UCS and a UCR is the smell of popcorn, which is a stimulus, or UCS, and this causes an involuntary response of my mouth to water, or an UCR. Another example is that I get a message on my phone, a UCS, and my heart rate goes up, a UCR. The next term that we need to learn is a conditioned stimulus, or CS. This is a stimulus that becomes able to produce a learned reflex response by being paired with the original unconditioned stimulus. For example, if I smell popcorn, which if you remember is the UCS, or unconditioned stimulus, and hear it popping, that's the conditioned stimulus, my mouth waters, and this becomes a learned reflex. Or I get a message on my phone, that's the UCS, and hear the ding, that's the conditioned stimulus, my heart rate goes up. And the last term is the conditioned response. This is the learned reflex response to the conditioned stimulus. Using our two examples of hearing the popcorn, which is a conditioned stimulus, and my mouth waters, which is a conditioned response. What's missing is the smell of popcorn. We no longer need that stop because we've learned. Following our message on the phone, I hear the tone, which is the conditioned stimulus, and my heart rate goes up. It's a conditioned response. Let's look at a few more examples. In this one, the unconditioned stimulus is the loud noise. It causes an involuntary response, which is being startled. If we bring in a conditioned stimulus, a rabbit, and pair it with a loud noise, the unconditioned stimulus, we still get the startled effect, which is the unconditioned response. If in time we find that the bunny startled us, it becomes the conditioned stimulus and the conditioned response. Let's look at another example. In this one, the unconditioned stimulus is a dog bite, and this leads to an unconditioned response of being frightened. Now, a conditioned stimulus is the sight of a dog. Pair that with the memory of the dog bite, and that leads to an unconditioned response of being frightened. In time, the sight of a dog can be the conditioned stimulus, and this leads to us being frightened, which is a conditioned response. So now we become frightened at the sight of a dog, and we no longer need to associate it with the dog bite. The last example is of an unconditioned stimulus of a kiss causing an unconditioned response of a racing heart. We can now bring in the sight of a significant other paired with the memory of the kiss causing an unconditioned response of the racing heart. In time, can you guess it? We can have the sight of the significant other just causing the racing heart. And we've got the principles of classical conditioning, and that's how it causes learning. The second type of learning is operant learning. Operant conditioning is a type of learning through voluntary behavior through the effects of pleasant and unpleasant consequences to responses. Simply put, actions followed by reinforcers increase while those followed by punishers decreases. Thorndike's law of effect is foundation of operant conditioning and is rather simple. If a response is followed by something pleasurable, it will be repeated. If it's followed by something unpleasant, it will not be repeated. Now, B.F. Skinner, if you remember from our lecture in Chapter 1, was a behaviorist. He was only interested in studying observational behavior. He gave operant conditioning its name. Operant means any behavior that is voluntary or that you have control over. In operant conditioning, learning depends on what happens after the response. Skinner elaborated on Thorndike's principles by developing what's called Skinner's box. The box has a lever that an animal presses to release food or water. There is also a light at the top of the box that warned of shocks that came through the bottom of the box. They soon learned that the animals learned depending on reinforcements and punishments. In operant conditioning, there are terms that need to be understood. The first is reinforcement. Reinforcement is any event or stimulus that, when following a response, increases the probability that the response will occur again. There are primary and secondary reinforcers. Primary reinforcers are those that are met with basic biological needs, such as hunger, thirst, or touch. An example is that we get food when we are hungry. Secondary reinforcers are those that are paired with a primary reinforcer, such as praise, tokens, or gold stars. Grades and money are common examples of secondary reinforcers. You give positive reinforcement when you reinforce a response by the addition or experiencing of a pleasurable stimulus. For example, you pet your dog when you call it and it comes to you, or you pay the pizza delivery guy when they bring you the pizza, or you get a gold star when you get the right answer. A negative reinforcement is a reinforcement of a stimulus of a response by the removal or the escape from or the avoidance of an unpleasant stimulus. The removal of a stimulus increases the probability of a response. For example, you take painkillers to end the pain, or you fasten the seatbelt to end the loud beeping, or you press the snooze button to end the buzzing, or you give in to your child's demand to end their whining. Now, punishment is often confused with negative reinforcement, so listen closely for the differences. Punishment is any event or object that, when following a response, makes that response less likely to happen again. It decreases the frequency of a behavior. Unfortunately, punishment has been known to only temporarily suppress or inhibit the behavior. Some drawbacks of punishment include that it may cause avoidance of the punisher instead of the behavior being punished. It may encourage lying to avoid the punishment, and it can create fear and anxiety. While punishment tells you what not to do, reinforcement tells you what to do. There are several ways to make punishment effective. Those include making sure that punishment immediately follows the behavior it is meant to punish, making sure it is consistent, and making sure it is paired with reinforcement of right behaviors. This concludes what we'll be covering in our PowerPoint mini lesson. The reflective log asks you to suggest ideas for future research designed to advance knowledge on the concepts in the chapter, or to apply the material learned in the chapter to a current news issue or to experiences in your own life. I suggest that you not only consider the concepts that you heard on this presentation, but also what you've learned in the rest of the chapter. Some interesting things to reflect upon would be a follow-up on punishment versus reinforcement. What are your thoughts on punishment? Did you have any further suggestions on classical conditioning? Are there any areas that you're unclear on? Did you read the link between spanking and aggression in children in the textbook? What are your thoughts about it? What further areas do you think should be researched? What have you seen in the news recently that you'd like to comment on? There are a lot of ideas out there from Chapter 5 that I hope that you have fun researching, and I can't wait to read your logs.